Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. Pardon my absence the last couple days. No updates because I've been meditating on a mountaintop trying to figure out what the hell has been going on. Most people do not realize how close we came this week to World War III. I mean, this was the closest brush with nuclear Armageddon that we've had thus far. The invocation of Article 4 would have immediately triggered the Russian strategic forces to go on a heightened state of alert, which could have potentially led to a chain reaction of accidents that could very well have us not communicating like this, but communicating using ham radio if we're one of the lucky ones. Now, we need to talk about this whole situation. And like I say, I haven't done an update in a couple nights because I've really been trying to just meditate on the issue because the fog of war is so incredibly thick right now. It's very difficult to know why the narrative has suddenly shifted. If you haven't noticed that, the narrative is starting to shift. And we're going to talk about the reason why I think they walked back. They did a complete 180 on the whole Russia struck Poland with missiles narrative. You remember when it first happened, the mainstream media, I believe it was Reuters or Associated Press, ran the story, Russia targets Poland. And then it was Russia unintentionally hits Poland with missile. Then it was Russian-made missile targets Poland. Then it was Ukrainian Russian-made missile probably targets Poland. Then it was Ukrainian missile targets Poland. Why did they walk it back? Well, I think part of the reason why they walked it back is because it perhaps occurred to somebody that if we do invoke Article 4 of NATO, which I talked about the other night, which basically has a council of all of the leaders of NATO countries come together, 29 countries, and discuss what are we going to do about this Russia problem, which is what NATO was made for. They were made for the purpose of containing the Russians. Now, somebody realized that if we do this, we risk nuclear Armageddon. So the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, got on the phone frantically trying to contact the Russians that night. Okay? This is all, declassified, if you will. This is all open source intel. And he wasn't able to get through to his counterpart in Russia, Valery Gerasimov, I'm assuming to negotiate and try to alleviate some tension surrounding this issue, because once again, it doesn't matter if Article 5 is necessarily invoked. They know that a precursor to that is always going to be Article 4, which is NATO countries coming together and effectively scheming what approach they're going to take to fighting the war. And it is a prelude, basically, to Article 5. Russia would know this. They put their strategic forces on a heightened state of alert. And that's when accidents happen, especially when you have the Russians today doing another Satan II missile test, the RS-28 Sarmat, a successful one at that. This nuclear missile can carry enough warheads to basically wipe off the entire eastern seaboard of its major cities with just one missile. Can carry 50 megatons worth of nuclear material. And that's now going into mass production. At the same time, you have nuclear submarines from all sides lurking all around the Black Sea, the Mediterranean Sea, the Baltic Sea. And you have all these strike carrier groups. You have all this military activity. You have the 101st Airborne. You just have, everything's happening at once. And to throw Article 4 into that fire would have probably ratcheted things up to levels that NATO is not comfortable with. People need to understand that if we were to fight a nuclear war with the Russians and the Chinese today, we would lose. I know somebody's just frothing at the mouth, typing down in the comment section, everybody would lose a nuclear war. You don't know what you're talking about. You haven't been paying attention to the information we've been trying to share with you, whether it's their SLBMs, or their mobile platforms that they can move around that can't be targeted by our nuclear forces, or whether it's their hypersonic missile capability, their Poseidon nuclear-powered nukes, their Skyfall system, which is supposed to be tested soon, their missile defense, which is superior, their anti-satellite capabilities, all of these things that we haven't been investing in because we're busy building military bases to fight conventional wars all around the world. The U.S. is a great superpower with a dozen really cool-looking aircraft carriers that all could be sunk by hypersonic nuclear-tipped missiles. Okay? So people need to realize that that's a reality, and I think that's why they walked it back. That's why there was that fracturing of the NATO alliance, where you have Poland and Ukraine begging NATO countries to play a more active role. Because understand, Poland and Ukraine and the Baltic states are banking on all other NATO countries coming to their aid if the shit hits the fan. If the Russians start to encroach, they want to know. They want to test the resolve of NATO. Are you guys really going to help us? Is this Article 5 mean anything at all? Or when the chips are down and you run out of weapons like you're now saying you are you going to come to our rescue or not? That's what they want to know. Now, the United States has sworn up and down that they will participate. But just notice, they know what the red line is. That has been made abundantly clear, that they were not willing to have any part in this narrative that the Russians inadvertently, or whatever the case, targeted the Poles, because they knew what that would entail. It would immediately tell this thing escalating to a point where they would lose, which is the strategic nuclear level. Again, go and watch the videos that we did with David Pine, Peter Pry. Those guys know their stuff, and they can educate you with respect to the true nuclear capabilities that you're really not supposed to know about. That in itself is what prompted the whole overhaul of the United States nuclear posture review that was just put out by the DOD not a month ago. Okay? So that is why, guys, that is why I think this whole thing was walked back, because they realized this is getting a little too close for comfort. Now, what's going on in the Ukrainian front? I don't claim to know what's going on. I'm just going to try to give you my best guess, okay? Here's what I think is going on. The Ukrainians are unwavering in their demands. They're marching forward at a fairly decent pace. People said they wouldn't cross the river. Guess what? They're crossing the river. They crossed that peninsula just west of Kherson. I guess it would be southwest of Kherson. And they're planning on doing Melitopol, which is a rather large city that is just south of Zaporozhye, I believe. And then, of course, from there, they cut off the annexed territories. They take back the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. They go down into Crimea, something that Russia will never allow. Russia will never allow the Ukrainians to have Crimea. The Black Sea ports that they have there are just too strategically important. They will use nuclear weapons before that ever happens. Okay? And you also have an eerily silent Russian military right now. You have the mobilization of these hundreds of thousands of troops. Remember, when they say they mobilize hundreds of thousands of troops, that doesn't count the troops that were already fighting, which were in the hundreds of thousands. We're talking about likely 500,000 to 700,000 troops that will be on the ground within the next month doing something. What are they going to be doing? Because right now you're hearing crickets. It's almost like there's no war going on. Well, if you look deeper, there definitely is a war being waged right now in the Donbass area in particular, where hundreds, if not thousands, of guys are dying every single day, where the Russians are making some headway. And it appears that they're willing to forgo the entire south right now, knowing perhaps that they're going to be able to take it back. And Kiev is concerned about this, which may be why this thing happened with the missile. And which is why Poland and Ukraine are on edge, and they needed something to happen to bring NATO into the fight before winter comes, because 50% of their citizens are now without power. 15 million people don't have power, don't have water, and it's getting cold. Okay, it's not like a place in below the equator or at the equator where it's warm and they don't have heat and electricity. Okay, you need heat and electricity to survive in these places. You're talking about a mass exodus into Poland, into the rest of Europe on an already strained power grid that is just going to have a huge ripple effect. And all of those full topped off reservoirs that we're seeing right now, like right now we're at the top of the well, okay? And that's why prices have kind of dipped a bit. But that's exactly what you would see. You remember when I explained it as, imagine you're crossing a desert. You know, you're gonna have the most water right when you embark on that journey, but just 1 kilometer into that journey, water becomes scarce. And that is exactly what we're going to see. We have this glut right now because everybody's been preparing for the long winter without Russian gas. And now we're going to see it. And without Russian oil, because of the oil price cap, now the Russians and the Chinese are going to be trading in their own currencies for those things. And because they're part of BRICS, that means that the Saudis are probably not too far behind. That means the collapse of the petrodollar, but that's another story. So Ukraine is going to be turned into an apocalyptic wasteland this winter unless a peace deal is made, which it doesn't look very likely because Ivan Nechayev, the commander of the Ukraine armed forces, has rejected any compromise and has pledged essentially to escalate the conflict, to go down into Melitopol to try to take back Crimea. They're already talking about the Poles playing more of a role in defending Ukrainian airspace. The Polish General Roman Polko has said that the country's air defense should assume responsibility for part of Ukrainian territory because, as was indicated, they weren't able to intercept this missile that came into their territory. Now, with respect to what happened with the missile situation, everybody immediately started dogpiling on Zelensky. The narrative shifted. All of a sudden, even the mainstream media was criticizing Zelensky, which was weird to me. I had to rub my eyes and see if I was actually seeing things clearly, because clearly the narrative kind of shifted. But why did they do that? Well, they did that because I think they couldn't, the back channels to the Russians, they weren't bulletproof. And for that reason, they walked it back very quickly. It could very well have been something that was shot from Belarus. It could have been rogue elements of the Ukrainian military. It could have been the Polish military who shot down a Russian or attempted to shoot down. And there's so many issues that people are claiming, and I don't know all the technicals. Some people are saying, they've made whole videos about how it was targeting a power system in Poland, that some sort of interconnect between Poland and Ukraine. Other people are saying that, well, there's no reason why a missile would deviate that far from its path. Like, why the hell would it be shooting in the opposite direction? That these missiles are supposed to self-destruct, that they have a self-destruct function. Some eyewitnesses said that they seen 2 missiles. Well, is that because the thing partially self-destructed and it broke into 2 pieces and 2 pieces landed here and there? Who knows? What are the odds of it actually hitting something, period? Like, what are the odds of it actually, if you look on a map, 99% of the map, people aren't. It's like rural, okay? There's no people there. So what are the odds of it actually hitting, a place where people actually were? So there's a lot of unanswered questions. And Zelensky vehemently denied that this missile came from Ukraine. Basically still to this day, although now somewhat making a concession that, well, we have to investigate, but still insisting, based on information that came from his own generals, and this is where I think maybe he's being kept out of the loop with respect to some of the stuff that might be going on. And maybe they do that for strategic ambiguity's sake, because, it's probably good that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing when you have this kind of puppet government that is happening right now, where it's being fully funded by NATO. The entire budget of Ukraine is being funded by NATO countries. We're footing the bill. So it's probably best, in order to keep the integrity of the leader in charge of a country like that, if you are going to do something shady, don't have him know about it or make him think that you never do something about it. So people need to understand that, I don't say this, I say this sparingly in the sense that you need to also understand that Zelensky's under a lot of pressure. And, for all we know, he's being played right now by various people on various sides of the fence. I've had my suspicions before that there indeed was infighting within Ukraine prior to this conflict, within the very hardline nationalist aspects of that country and people who are perhaps a bit more liberal and a bit more permissive of Russian influence. And what the Russians did immediately is they took out the Azov. Okay, they took out the most hardline of the hardlines. And some might say, well, maybe that suited, that they kind of did the Ukrainian government a favor in doing that, because the problem with radicals is you got to manage them. And if they're not on your side, and if they don't have your full allegiance, then they could be liabilities. But that's just me thinking outside the box. I don't know if any of that is true, so don't take it to the bank. But it appears as though the war is about to get really, really messy, because Ukraine is not going to have the critical infrastructure to sustain even half of their population right now. They're still being bombarded day in, day out. General Armageddon has a plan, it appears, to, in the very least, take the western side, the eastern side of the river, and that the river is going to be the new Berlin Wall. It's just going to be a new natural boundary that's not man-made. Berlin Wall 2.0. Now, even that, though, is probably not going to fly, because that would still put them too close to Kiev. And I don't think Kiev's going to go for that. And then you have the situation of Kharkov. Retaking that city is going to be a bloodbath, because that's a city of like 1.2 million people. You have many cities along the way in which you have populations of millions of people who are going to be without power. And it's just going to be a bloody World War II style battle where you have no critical infrastructure. People are lighting fires to keep warm the ones who stay behind. Anyways, you have Ukraine drafting Kherson residents. They're already filing over the river, trying to take back the rest of the country. So, yeah, it does not look good. I think that we just got a brief little glimpse of what the situation is going to look like. And I think maybe NATO would be wise to not announce these articles if they're invoked anymore. I mean, I don't see why it needs to be something made public, because right when you do that, that's when things get really sketchy with respect to, you just have too many militaries and too many people are on edge, too much nuclear tension in the air. North Korea, now officially an intercontinental ballistic missile nuclear wielding country who can hit the United States with a missile that travels 17,000 kilometers an hour. That's never a good thing. So you have the South Koreans who are now preparing an exercise or doing another military exercise simulating an invasion of the North. I don't know what they're thinking with respect to that. Are we going to see a nuclear war on the Korean Peninsula? That's not a very big place, and there's a lot of densely populated regions. So if that is the case and Seoul does get wiped off the map, now they're going to do it literally. And if North Korea goes, then China gets woken up. Inevitably, Russia gets woken up, and the shit hits the fan. We have Europe preparing for blackouts. They're preparing for bank runs on cash, because I would just recommend, if you have a safe place to store it, get cash. Before we go full-blown Mad Max barter, like is probably going to happen in Ukraine this winter, cash is still going to be king. And make sure you have some money out of the bank. I'm not saying get all your money out of the bank. I'm not giving you any sort of financial advice. I'm just saying that if you have any surplus money at your disposal, keep some of it in cash, just in case, because cash will still be recognized for a long time after the whole thing collapses. There's a snowstorm in Buffalo, state of emergency. The weather is all messed up all around the world. This COP27 thing, I think the outcome is now that we've accepted that we're easily going to hit 1.5 degrees C of warming. And this is where I deviate from a lot of preppers on the channel. Don't bother lecturing me about grand solar minimum and all the rest. I've made thousands of videos. I've read every possible comment and watched every possible channel and real expert on the topic. The planet is heating up. Whether you want to believe it's anthropogenic or not doesn't really matter. That's the fact. In fact, it's not only heating up. I did not realize this, and I'm pretty sure they don't talk about this because they don't want to panic the population too much. You see how they're going to milk a crisis? They're always going to milk a crisis. The World Economic Forum, all these guys, of course they're going to milk a good crisis. They're never going to let it go to waste. That doesn't mean the crisis isn't real. Okay, COVID was real, but they milked it as much as they could. Same thing with this warming thing. Now, what people need to understand, 1.5 C of global average temperature increase, that just doesn't mean 1.5 C, because that is distributed. The oceans on average have already heated 0.77, I believe, and the land mass is what's heating much faster. The land mass of all the continents is heating much faster than the ocean. And that means that when we say 1.5 degrees C average global temperature rise on land where everybody lives, we're talking a lot more. Europe is going to see some of the worst effects in the sense that droughts, wildfires, inability to grow crops, and of course now that's going to be more problematic because the price of fertilizer is going to go through the roof, the price of energy is going to go through the roof. If you don't have energy and you don't have fertilizer, you can't feed 8 billion people. Fortunately, I just read an article the other day, fortunately, feels weird saying fortunately for something like this, but sperm counts, you know, they used to say that sperm counts have been diminished by 50% in the last few decades. Well, apparently the rate of sperm decline has doubled again. So it's like 2.6% a year since 2020. Prior to that, it was 1.3. So nature is correcting something, regardless of whether we go nuclear or not. Nature is correcting it, whether it's something in the water, whether it was all the nuclear testing that was done back in the 60s, who knows, but something is making people infertile. And that compared with the crazy climate chaos that is about to ensue because the jet stream is simply broken. And all of these places, like we seen that with Texas 2 years ago, their power grid is not equipped to deal with those types of winters. And what happens with a broken jet stream where the Arctic overheats faster than the equator and all the rest, I'm not going to explain it again, is that you're going to have these weather anomalies happening for more sustained period of time that the grids in those places are simply not built to deal with. And you're going to have collapse. You're going to have places that aren't built to deal with people pumping their air conditioners 24/7, having rolling blackouts. You're going to have places that aren't equipped to deal with people running heaters and natural gas 24/7, not being able to meet their energy demands. Now, fortunately, in Europe's case, you know, this warming thing couldn't have come at a better time because the Russians obviously are not going to be able to supply them with as much natural gas and oil when the oil cap comes into place, because the Russians aren't going to play ball with that. At least they're going to use laundering channels, which are going to, you know, make it harder, and it's going to increase the price nonetheless. So that means that Europe may be spared a little bit if, you know, they get the better side of the jet stream. And it appears as though they have thus far, but it's still getting cold outside and everybody's going to be tested real soon. So like I said, state of emergency in Buffalo with the lake effect, snow raining down or falling down, I guess you could say. We have nuclear missiles being tested all over the planet. We have, what else do we got going on here? We got so much stuff that has transpired in the last, oh yeah, there was this other story, and I don't know how much to put in this or whether or not it's significant. I probably should have talked about this because this is one of the most sensationalist headlines of the day. But apparently there was this nuclear-capable X-55 cruise missile was shot down by Ukrainian air defense, and a photo of the wreckage and identification of the actual missile model type appeared in the image. And this was designed specifically, this X-55, to carry a single 200 kiloton warhead, which was around 15 times that of the Hiroshima bomb. Okay, and this was down. So one of them, the KH-55 model, Russian designation X-55, was originally developed to carry that 200 kiloton payload, was downed. Does this signal that the Russians are running out of weapons and they're starting to use these different delivery systems for their conventional munitions? Who knows? But according to CNN, the Pentagon is also running out of weapons. And what does that mean? Well, that is the cue to cue war mobilization. That's the cue to get us out of the coming recession, or the recession that we're in and possible depression, is to start building more weapons and tanks for World War III. Because NATO is not ready to fight the Russians. And I don't think anybody's really ready when it comes down to it. I don't think the Russians are ready either, but they are getting prepared. They are now on full war mobilization mode. And what other countries in the coalition are on war mobilization mode? Well, none of them, really. And they're all dealing with increased energy costs, with an increased migrant crisis that grows by the day, and dwindling currency valuations and all the rest, and all of the residual effects of COVID, and bird flu, which is about to probably jump to humans. So yeah, I would encourage you all to, get your gas mask, get your nuclear survival skills manual, your THYROSAFE and all the rest, just in case. All of that stuff lasts for 20 years. So, in the case that you don't need it immediately, it's not going to go bad. Food, I did that Harvest Right freeze dryer video yesterday. And, I always get the same comments on that video when I do videos like that. I do them because it's a great machine, and I'm going to actually have like a freeze dry Friday thing where we just freeze dry different things every week, because it's a revolutionary machine. I can tell you guys that I work with about 100 different companies. They all make amazing products, but they all don't have amazing customer service. The number one customer service that I've ever experienced is Harvest Right. If any of my customers who buy a Harvest Right freeze dryer ever have problems, I call Harvest Right. They say Nate's customer has a problem, and they deal with it. They deal with it from start to finish. No BS. No, you got to do this and you got to do that and that. I mean, they have set a new standard even for us for how we approach customer-related issues. And I can say that you're never going to find service like that. Now, that is when it comes through me. I don't know what the experience is if you consult with them directly, but when one of our customers has a problem, they deal with it lickety-split. I don't know if it's because I think, they're based out of Salt Lake City, which is a city that is renowned for its religious roots, Mormons in particular. And, Mormons, whether you agree with them or not, they're friendly people, and religious people in general tend to be pretty friendly people, and they always approach even the most, disgruntled customers. They will approach them with utter kindness and immediately calm them down and get them everything they need in order to feel at ease. So that's all I can say about that company, man. Just an amazing company, an amazing one-of-a-kind machine. They're the only company. There's this other company now that apparently has completely knocked off their product. They've just reversed the way the door is facing in order to avoid, patent infringement or whatever it is. And somebody notified me of this yesterday. And don't get me wrong, competition is great. But competition should also bring some new level of innovation. It shouldn't just be a carbon copy, and because you're never gonna get the service that you're gonna get. You might get the freeze dryer for $600-700 less, but you're never gonna get the service, the warranty, and all the rest. So yeah, that's why we promote those things. And again, every time I make that video, anytime I make a video of a big ticket item that I understand most people aren't going to be able to afford something like that, you need to understand that there are people in this game, in this prepping game, that have been doing this for years. There are people who have worked their entire lives, okay, who might have some disposable income that they might want to invest in something like that. If you're in your 20s or 30s nowadays, you're struggling to find a job, I've been there, I've done that. Don't worry about buying a freeze dryer. Go get a piece of chalk, go over to the blackboard, and write this out 100 times. Rice and beans in Mylar bags. Rice and beans in Mylar bags. No matter how many times I make those videos, people are like, well, what do? I can't afford a freeze dryer. Don't worry about it. Not everybody needs a freeze dryer. It's just another one of those luxuries that maybe after you've prepped for 10 years and you have everything under the sun that you're ever going to need, you decide instead of buying a brand new car, maybe I'm going to buy this appliance, and maybe a brand new car that's just slightly less. So it's not these things that we show you on the channel. I review them because they're cool. I like technology. I'm not just a technophobe who wants to rub sticks together in the wilderness. Don't get me wrong, I respect the hell out of those people who can do that stuff. I've only done one successful friction fire, and it took me a long time. But I like technology. I like showing off the gear. A lot of it is very expensive. We're gonna be reviewing some thermal optics in the coming months ahead, and that stuff is really wildly expensive, and I don't expect 99.9% of people. But you should know that it exists, and you can make it a goal for yourself if you really want to, go all the way and give yourself as much of an edge when it comes to prepping for the big one as possible. It's something for you to look forward to. You don't need it, okay? So I'm gonna try to bring a little bit of levity to the conversation this weekend. We just made a video that I could barely contain myself when I made the video, and you guys probably won't find it as funny as I thought it was, but yeah, it's going to show what happens when you're unprepared when the big one hits. So stay tuned for that. Let me know what you think about all this craziness in the news in the comment section below. You guys take care of yourselves, and get out there, test out your winter gear. Just got back from a little excursion with the kids and the dogs. We broke in the winter wood stove and Nortent Gam 6 for the winter, and man, it was cozy. You got to do things like that every once in a while, if only just to appreciate what we have here with the grid. And I find when I go out on a hardcore outing like that, and it's uncomfortable for a good part of the trip, I come back, I feel stronger, I just feel mentally better. I feel lighter because you burn a lot of calories in the process, and I just feel better, feel healthier. So make sure you get out there, test your gear, get off the computer. Let me know what you guys think. Well, get off the computer after you leave a comment on this video. Take care, guys.